I, for one, love playing Digital Combat Simulator. There's nothing quite like hopping into a F-14 Tomcat, hitting the afterburners, and doing a flyby of the control tower at over 400 knots. But if there's one thing I don't like about DCS, that's its inaccessibility. Or rather, perceived inaccessibility for the everyday gamer. I mean, sure, there's an understandably steep learning curve to DCS since, after all, we're learning how to fly freaking fighter jets, but that's not what I'm talking about. My issue comes even before that, and that is the belief that an expensive HOTAS, rotor pedals, and track IR or VR is needed at a minimum just to enjoy DCS. I don't know about you, but I kind of like the idea of being able to kick up my feet, get comfy on my couch, and still live out my Tomcat flying fantasies. I'm here to tell you, you can. With the right modifiers and bindings, you too can take out MiG-28s and the Admiral's Daughter with nothing but a gamepad. Now with that said, you can't truly experience DCS with that alone. At least, not until you found yourself clicking buttons and switches in a desperate attempt to start a full fidelity aircraft. And unfortunately, this can't be done using only a gamepad. There's simply way too many buttons to bind, so you're forced to use a mouse. And currently, it's impossible to control the mouse with a gamepad in DCS, at least not out of the box. External programs like Input Mapper, Joystick Gremlin, or Steam Controller Configurator can make this possible, but that adds a layer of complexity that an everyday gamer probably doesn't want to deal with.
Left engine fire.
The less money and complexity to get the job done, the better. To that end, here's 3 things DCS World needs for the everyday gamer. Number 1. Add mouse movement binding options to access commands. As it is currently, we can already bind left and right mouse click to any button we want. This is especially useful for VR players because the cursor is tied to their head, meaning they can simply look at a switch, press a button on their HOTAS, and activate it, all without reaching for a mouse. It would be great to extend this ability out to non-VR users by allowing us to bind mouse movement to an axis. This way we could control mouse movement with a gamepad's right stick and interact with a cockpit using buttons bound to left and right mouse click. Additionally, a free byproduct of this addition would be relative camera control. Using force cursor on and off, the player could force cursor off to control the camera with the right stick. Then, force cursor on to switch from camera to cursor control to do things like interact with the cockpit. Then, when finished, force cursor off again to switch to relative camera control. And just like in VR, all this camera and cursor movement can be done without reaching for a mouse. Number 2. Allow UI layer actions to double bind with modifier assignments. DCS does a great job of warning the player that their bindings are overlapping with other control actions. For example, if you set up a button as mouse left click in the UI layer and attempt to also bind that button to an action, for example, the Viper's autopilot pitch switch, DCS will complain and prevent that action from working in the Viper. However, this also applies to buttons that have been set up as modifiers. Since modifiers by themselves don't do anything, it should be okay to allow modifiers and UI layer actions to double bind to the same controller assignments. Now, I know this sounds a little fishy, but hear me out. Imagine I've got the following binding set up. Let's say I've got right shoulder button as a Hornet modifier. Then TDC slew axis to that same right shoulder modifier plus right stick axis. And finally, under UI layer, set left mouse click to that same right shoulder button. With these bindings set up and assuming I can control the cursor with right stick, I can force cursor off to look down at the radar DDI. Then I can force cursor on, move the cursor over the radar DDI, and use right shoulder to click the DDI push buttons. After that, I can then hold right shoulder and use the right stick to slew the TDC, all without moving the cursor around due to modifier priority. Because of this combination of bindings, a gamepad player can use the radar DDI to its fullest using only a gamepad controller. No mouse necessary. And number 3, allow mouse scroll up and down to be bound to an axis. It's possible to rotate knobs in the cockpit by holding left mouse click and moving the cursor up or down. For example, we can change the volume in the Hornet's radio by clicking and dragging. However, There are some knobs which cannot be turned in this way. For example, the Hornet's radar altimeter knob is activated when the mouse is clicked. As a result, holding the mouse click does not allow the cursor movement to rotate the knob. Instead, mouse scroll must be used. To allow full cockpit interaction with a gamepad, it would be good to allow mouse scroll up and down to be bound to a controller axis. And that's about it. So, just to recap, the 3 items I feel DCS needs in order to allow the everyday gamer to play DCS with only a gamepad are 1. Being able to bind mouse movement to a controller axis. 2. Allow UI layer actions to double bind with modifier assignments. And 3. Allow scroll up and down to be bound to a controller axis. Now with all that said, I know it's not going to be that simple. It's going to take some effort, but I just wanted to make a point. In fact, the gameplay you're watching right now is all being played with absolutely no mouse and no keyboard. Everything you're seeing is being controlled with a simple Xbox controller and input mapper set up to allow the very 3 items I've suggested DCS should have out of the box. Now, of course, there's probably going to be people out there that say, why would anyone ever think of playing DCS with a gamepad? Go out, buy yourself a proper HOTAS, and play DCS the way it's meant to be played. And you know what? You're right. Playing DCS with a proper HOTAS setup is probably the most immersive way you can ever play DCS, and it's probably the way it's meant to be played. But this video isn't for you. This video is for that gamer who has all the time in the world to learn how to play DCS, but none of the money to be able to play DCS the way others are telling them to play it. And I'm here to tell you, you too can play DCS. And maybe one day you won't need a third-party application to do it. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you really liked it and would like to see more of this kind of stuff, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you agree that these changes are worth putting precious development time into, feel free to share this video and make our voices heard. And until next time, please take care and have a nice day.